Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. Lucas and Sophie had been friends since they were children. They lived in neighboring houses and first went to the same nursery, then to kindergarten, and then, holding hands, they went to first grade together. Lucas always defended Sophie if she was picked on by boys and carried her heavy briefcase full of textbooks. He was a diligent student, went in for honors and participated in school science Olympiads, often winning first places. Sophie, on the other hand, was in the ranks of the mediocre. She was a fidgety and mischievous chatterbox who could not sit still and was often scolded by her teachers. As a teenager, Lucas realized one day that he no longer treated his blue-eyed, snub-nosed classmate as just a childhood friend. His heart sank sweetly in his chest when he looked at her during classes. Sometimes Lucas was so obsessed with Sophie that he didn't even hear what the teacher was saying. "You'll rub a hole on Sophie," Amy Clark, the head of the class, playfully teased Lucas. It probably looked funny from the outside. But Lucas didn't care if he looked stupid in the eyes of others. Nothing and no one in the world was more important to him than Sophie. A light, innocent, and sincere feeling was born in the heart of a young man who had not yet known the pain of betrayal, resentment, and betrayal. So reverently touching, it swept over him. How beautiful she is. He admired the object of his reverie, proudly her posture, her swan neck, her long, slender fingers. And her movements were so smooth, graceful, like a wildcat's. Lucas looked at Sophie through the prism of infatuation. He saw her as an unearthly creature, refined, aristocratic. But in fact, this girl was from a simple working-class family. Her mother worked as a sales clerk and her father as an electrician. The salaries of Sophie's parents were small, and they lived poorly, but they still tried to pamper their only daughter. She had beautiful dolls, sweets, and fancy clothes. Lucas could only dream of that. He grew up in a single-parent family. His mother was in charge of his upbringing. After his father died under mysterious circumstances when the boy was 11 years old, his father had a commercial flair and decided to open a private security agency. Everything was going smoothly for him, and no one doubted the success of the venture. However, all plans were put to rest. One tragic evening, the man went to the store to buy groceries and disappeared. There were no preconditions for his disappearance. He was not into alcohol, did not quarrel with his wife, and did not seem to have any enemies. Without waiting for her husband home, Lucas' mother Alice sounded the alarm and called 911. The cops having finished out his health. He was in the paratroopers, and they don't take sick people there. I'm sure it was murder. Police just didn't want to deal with the whole thing, she explained to her son. Why bother investigating crimes when you can write them off as accidents? Lucas's father did not tell his wife the details of his business, so there was much he might not have known. The woman worked in a factory. When her husband was alive, the family did not need anything. Now Lucas and his mother lived on the miserable salary of a dispatcher. It was not easy for them financially. The widow wanted her son to have everything he needed. However, they only had enough money for the bare necessities. To earn an extra penny, Alice took a second job as a morning janitor at the medical center. Even so, the woman could not afford any excesses for herself or the child. One day for his birthday, she gave Lucas the money to choose any gift he wanted for himself. And then Alice found out that her boy had spent it all on ice cream, candy, and soda for his classmate Sophie. "You've fallen in love with the wrong girl, son." The woman shook her head. "I can feel it in my heart that this girl is trouble." During the last school year, a new student came to Lucas and Sophie's class. Handsome Willie appeared in the classroom as if he had stepped off the pages of some glossy magazine. "Look at those sneakers. And the jacket. Rich kid." The classmates whispered with undisguised envy as they looked at the stranger. Everyone looked at the fashionably dressed Willie like he was a superstar. Rarely could anyone in their town boast of such cool clothes. Lucas was skeptical of the new guy at first. He thought he was a snob who happened to be in their neck of the woods. But he soon changed his mind. Willie turned out to be quite easygoing without any attitude. He never bragged about his clothes or his wealth. Lucas thought Willie was a nice guy. They began to talk and soon became good friends. They socialized a lot and went out almost every day. Sometimes Sophie kept them company. The trio spent hours aimlessly strolling through the streets of the city or the alleys of the city park. And if the weather was bad for a walk, Lucas and Sophie liked to hang out at Willie's house. They always went there with great enthusiasm. After all, Willie always had something to do. Watch a movie on the VCR, listen to music, or play a console. The first time Lucas visited his comrade, he could not hide his sincere admiration. The latest appliances, expensive furniture, interior decoration, everything was of the highest order here. Are your parents famous lawyers? I couldn't help but wonder. You say that too. No, of course not. It's just that my stepfather's a businessman, Louis Johnston. Maybe you've heard of him. A lot of people know him around here. Didn't he by any chance buy computers for our school this year? Sophie asked. He does, Willie nodded. He's got several commercial firms, a cash collection company, stores, and soon he'll have a bank too. It's quite a spread, isn't it? He's a real high flyer, a real tough guy. He's tight with the governor of the city. He comes to our house a lot, and my stepfather has a lot of connections. Doctors, tax authorities, customs, artists of all kinds, government officials and criminal bosses. What else could it be? Nowadays, you can't go anywhere without connections. If you want to live, you've got to know how to spin, as they say. My stepfather is a terribly busy man. He's rarely home. He's always away on business trips, often travels abroad. So he brings all that junk from there. If my father were alive, we'd be just as well, Lucas said sadly as he looked around the apartment. He was an active man, too. Active, punchy, and smart. Where is your birth father? Is he dead too, like Lucas? Sophie asked Willie. Why did he die? He's alive and well. He's a reporter working for a pittance at the local paper in the outback, where I was born and raised. My daddy lives a miserable existence in a squalid slum. You should see the place. The ceiling leaks. The toilet is always clogged. Cockroaches everywhere. I lived there too, until my mother and father got divorced. Last year she married my stepdad and he moved us here. You must be really worried about the breakup of your family, Lucas said. After all, a stranger has replaced your own father. You're kidding. What's there to worry about? My dad is a characterless loser who didn't know how to adapt to change. I think it's every man's sacred duty to take care of his family, and he couldn't or wouldn't do it. He and I have very little contact now, but that doesn't particularly upset me. I like my stepfather and the new life he provides for me and my mother, he answered. Is your mom in business too? Sophie asked. No. She was a manager by training. But she hasn't worked a day since she got married the second time. She doesn't do anything all day. She just goes to salons, chats on the phone with her friends for hours, flips through fashion magazines, and pesters me with her valuable advice. Lilith was a well-groomed woman who took great care of her appearance, always wearing makeup with her hair and a bright manicure. She knocked timidly into her son's room. Are you guys hungry? And I brought you something delicious, said the hostess and put a tray with some kind of treat on the table in front of the guests. It was while visiting his friend that Lucas tasted the kind of food that he had never even known existed before. Willie was generous and spared nothing for his friends. He willingly shared everything he had. He could, for example, just give Lucas a t-shirt that his stepfather had brought back from another trip abroad, and once he even gave him a box with a pair of cool sneakers. What is it, Vovka? It's a lot of money. I can't accept such an expensive gift. Lucas at first refused the presentation. Take the sneakers, or I'll be offended. They're too small for me anyway. At least you can use them, Willie insisted. When Lucas realized that his friend was a good guy and could be trusted, he told him how he felt. You know, I've been in love with Sophie for a long time. Lucas confessed to his friend. I don't even look at other girls. In that case, let's be frank for the revelation, he replied. I know what you mean. Sophie is a great girl. Beautiful, slender, funny. I'm quite fond of her myself, to tell you the truth. What do we do now? Lucas was puzzled. You and I are kind of rivals, aren't we? We'll keep in touch as before, Willie said confidently. I don't think our friendship should be hindered in any way by this discovery. Let things take their course. Let's let Sophie make her own choice. She has to decide which of us she likes better. Lucas was 100% sure that the girl's choice would not be in his favor. He seemed too unenviable a fiancé to the packed, handsome Willie. However, time passed, and Sophie remained indifferent to both suitors. She still chatted with them, sometimes joined them for walks together, but she did not single out either of the two. The prom rumbled on. Lucas and Willie graduated from high school and went to university. Only Sophie failed the tests and went to college to learn. Studying was taking up a lot of time, and now they couldn't see each other as often as they had before. Autumn flew by and winter began. That frosty evening, Lucas sat at his desk with his books and notebooks all around him. He was cramming for his lectures and preparing for his first exam. He was interrupted by a phone call. Hi, he heard Sophie's ringing voice on the phone. What are you doing? Studying, Lucas informed her. So, is this a bad time? I must be distracting, the girl said worriedly. No, I'm glad to hear from you, the young man admitted. I haven't talked to you in 100 years. It's only 4 days, Sophie said. But it seemed like an eternity to me, Lucas smiled. Tell me, do you remember what's going to happen this Saturday? I was wondering mysteriously about the girl. Well, of course I remember. Who could forget such a thing? It's the most beautiful day of the year. Your birthday, Lucas said. That's right. My parents decided to throw a party to celebrate the occasion. I want to invite you to the party, Sophie said. So you should come over, if you're not busy, of course. And ask Alice to make her cheesecake. I love it. You're kidding. What could be more important than your birthday? I will definitely be there. With cake and more, Lucas promised. He hung up the phone and puzzled over the question of a gift. All his last money the other day had been spent on new winter boots. Now he had no idea where he could get the money for a worthy present for Sophie. The young man felt ashamed to ask his mother because she already had every penny in her pocket. And anyway, she could not give much. Lucas took the piggy bank he had been saving for a rainy day out of the closet, broke it, and sadly assessed its contents. That's probably just enough for a small bouquet, he estimated disappointedly. But to go to Sophie's 18th birthday party with just one bouquet was not appropriate or even embarrassing. No, Willie said in a calm tone. Well, maybe she hasn't had time yet, Lucas suggested. He was embarrassed. He couldn't imagine that Sophie would ignore Willie. There was another awkward pause. Well, congratulations. Apparently Sophie picked you out of the two of us, Willie said. Do you really think so? Lucas exclaimed. He couldn't hide the emotions that gripped him. After all, what his friend had said had excited him. I'm pretty sure of that, Willie replied. It looks like I've lost this war. Lucas had mixed feelings. On the one hand, he was unspeakably happy about his unexpected victory, but at the same time, he was a little hurt for his best friend, so he decided to cheer him up. Don't get upset. I'm sure you'll meet the right girl, Lucas said. Upset? No way, Willie smirked back. Never mind. Anyway, I've got something going on here at the Institute. A girl like that, she's better than Sophie. She's coming over tomorrow to study for my philosophy final. And maybe I'll get something more than just lecture notes. So there's no telling which one of us is the loser. Now I know, my cheerful friend, Lucas laughed back. I never doubted you. The friends chatted some more and said goodbye. But about 10 minutes later, Willie called Lucas again. I completely forgot to ask. What did you buy at Sophie's as a gift? Nothing yet, Lucas admitted honestly. I'm sitting here wondering where I can get some money. Listen, maybe you can lend me some until next month. I'll pay you right back when I get the money. I think I can, the friend replied. Thanks, Willie, you helped me out. Don't mention it, Willie answered magnanimously. And what are you going to buy her if it's no secret? I don't know either. Maybe a French perfume or a cosmetic set, Lucas suggested. It's all nonsense. I have a better idea. I bought something for a friend of mine. It's nothing special, just a little bling. We had something going on, but then she hooked up with someone else. That's what I thought, Willie went on. It's not like it's going to go to waste now. Is it? Come to my place right now, take a look, and if you like it, you can have it. We'll settle up sometime later. Lucas dressed quickly, and 15 minutes later was at the door of Willie's apartment. Here's the present I told you about, he said, and handed the guest a beautiful velvet box. Lucas opened it and saw a small brooch in the shape of a bird, inlaid with multicolored stones that shimmered from color to color. Wow! What can I say, Willie? You have excellent taste, refined, not like me, Lucas said admiringly. It is what it is, he smiled. It must have cost you a lot of money, Lucas said as he continued to look at the brooch. It's gorgeous, but I think I'll pass. I'm afraid I can't afford it. It would take me years to pay you back. Come on. It's just a piece of glass, a trinket. Did you really think I'd give something of value to a passing acquaintance? It's too fat. Take a good look. You'd think it was, well, made costume jewelry, wouldn't you? That's all, Willie assured him. Well, you're the one who understands it. What do I know about jewels? My mother never had anything like that. One engagement ring and some silver earrings. That's all she had. Lucas tried to justify himself. Willie nodded understandingly. Take it, don't refuse it. It's fashionable. I think Sophie will appreciate it. What do I need that brooch for now? With joy, Lucas was ready to give his friend a big hug. I'll take it, but on one condition. I'll give every penny, Lucas said. I don't like being in debt. You've helped me out a lot. It's nothing. He waved his hand. No, really, Willie. I'm immensely grateful to you. I also admire you. It was a very noble thing you did. After all, you did have some feelings for Sophie. Come on, Willie said. What's past is past. You've got to know how to lose, too. Lucas shook his friend's hand. Thank you. You know, I want to tell Sophie I love her tomorrow. I think it's a good time, he said before he left. I wish you luck, Willie replied. On Saturday, Lucas, full of excitement, armed with flowers, cheesecake, and a present, went to see the birthday girl. Among the guests were her new college friends and girlfriends whom he had never seen before. Lucas felt uncomfortable among them. While they were joking and enjoying themselves, he kept aloof. The company was discussing fancy clothes, movies, and the delights of traveling abroad, sharing stories. Lucas didn't know a thing about it. He felt he was not welcome at this party. Lucas had handed Sophie a gift and was still trying to improve the moment to talk to her, but she was always busy with someone else in the room. It seemed to Lucas that she didn't notice him at all. Maybe she invited me out of politeness, so to speak, out of old memory, he suggested. Lucas made several attempts to blend in. He recalled a few jokes and tried to find a common topic of conversation, but nothing came of the idea. So, after sitting alone for a couple of hours, a frustrated Lucas went home without ever explaining himself to Sophie. The next morning he was awakened by the insistent ringing of the doorbell. Until a moment ago, Lucas had been passionately kissing Sophie's scarlet lips in his dreams. He wanted this beautiful dream to last forever. But when he opened his eyes, he saw before him not the enchanting fairy of his nightmares, but the restless, pale face of his mother. "Son, the police are here to see you." "From the police? But why?" Lucas wondered. The young man jumped out of bed and started pulling on his pants. "You've been accused of some crime," Alice reported in a shaky voice, her hand clutching her heart. "Tell me the truth, son. What did you do yesterday?" "A crime." "What kind of nonsense is that? Mom, please. Please calm down. This is some kind of ridiculous mistake. I swear to you that I didn't do anything illegal." "We'll get to the bottom of this," the son assured his mother. It turned out that the police had been called by Lilith, Willie's mother. The woman accused Lucas of nothing less than theft. She claimed he had stolen her jewelry. "I came home. I looked in the box, and I noticed that the brooch my husband brought me from the Arab Emirates had disappeared," she said. "Of course, the first thing I did was to ask my son if anyone had been in the house. And Willie confessed that his friend Lucas had been to see him. He was a friend of my son's from a poor family. Apparently, he was the one who wanted the expensive jewelry." Lucas was shocked by this brazen slander. He denied it, of course, and he told his own version of what had happened, but it did not sound very convincing, especially since one of the protagonists, Willie, did not confirm it. "Then I would take my mother's expensive brooch without her knowledge. Never in my life." He was indignant. "It's worth a lot of money, isn't it? Am I crazy? I should give away things like that for nothing. And besides, I know how much it means to my mother. After all, my stepfather gave her this pamphlet on her wedding day, and my mother is very dear to her. She'll starve, but she won't part with it for anything. So much for the trinket." "Alas," Lucas marveled. "I strongly advise you to confess to everything," said the detective. "Then you have a good chance of getting a suspended sentence. Otherwise, you might go to jail for theft." "But I didn't steal it, I swear to you," assured Detective Lucas. He knew they didn't believe him. He wanted to howl like a wolf at the blatant injustice of it all. But that wasn't even the worst part. His heart ached for Sophie. He felt bad that she, too, had been unwittingly dragged into this whole sordid affair. "I knew it. There is in my heart. I felt that from this girl we are hogging the grief," cried the mother. "What's Sophie got to do with it?" "Don't blame her," the son answered. "She's as much a victim here as I am." Lucas knew that Sophie had also been questioned, and of course, the present had been confiscated. He was terribly ashamed. What if she, like the interrogator, didn't believe he hadn't stolen the brooch? "Yeah, I'll say. It was a nice present. Memorable. It'll be remembered for the rest of my life," said Lucas sadly. He desperately wanted revenge, to deal man with the man he had naively considered his friend. Scoundrel. I couldn't imagine that he would try to get me out of his way in such a disgusting way. And he pretended he wasn't too upset. He was talking about how you have to lose, but he set me up so badly. I trusted him like I trusted myself. How could he do that? The young man was indignant. I was tempted to punch him in his cheeky, lying face and teach him a lesson that he would remember for the rest of his life. "Son, I'm begging you, don't do this," my mother asked. "You won't get out of jail if you don't. I've already lost my husband, and I don't want to lose my only son. I couldn't bear it. Leave their family alone. God be their judge. They'll get a boomerang for what they've done." It was only for his mother's sake that Lucas restrained himself from his intentions, and he wanted so badly to catch Willie and hold him accountable. The detective was right. Lucas got probation, except that after the whole story, the university expelled him, and the young man went into the army. For 2 years while he served, he wrote long letters to Sophie. "Believe me, it's not my fault. You've known me since I was a kid. I've never taken anyone else's money in my life. Willie tricked me, set me up like the last sucker. God knows I'd never give you anything I stole in my life. I love you more than anybody else in this world. You're dear to me like no one else. I should have told you that a long time ago. But circumstances came as they did, and I hope that you will certainly understand me. Lucas never heard back from Sophie. However, he did not blame her or even justify her. She was understandable. But who would want to deal with a thief, he reasoned. During his time in the service, Lucas made some new friends. He became particularly close friends with Andrew. He too was from a provincial town, and like Lucas was going through a personal love tragedy. I had a fiancée, Nicole, he said frankly. I loved her more than life. We'd been dating since we were 16. She wanted her husband to be a lawyer. I don't know why a lawyer. Maybe she'd been watching too many soap operas. I'd do anything for her. That's why I went to law school. Although I went to really wanted to go to an auto mechanics college. My dad's an auto mechanic, and I spent all day in the garage with him as a kid. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and didn't even think about higher education. But I had to reconsider my plans and shove all my desires to the back of my mind. I just wanted Nicole to be happy. And so instead of going under the hood of the car, I sat over my books from morning till night, first to get into that law school, and then to make sure I didn't fail the tests. What do you think? While I was chewing the cobwebs of science, my dearest Nicole wasted no time in having an affair behind my back. I couldn't believe it. How could you betray me? I did it for you, didn't I? And you know what she said? That it was all my fault. I was always busy, and she was bored, you see. The other guy got Nicole pregnant and married soon after. As soon as I found out, I decided to join the Army. I quit law school and signed a contract with the Army. It's a small town. Everything is out in the open, and I didn't want to meet her. Why torture and suffer? I was sick to see her new husband, too. Isn't that what they say? Out of sight, out of mind. So I thought that being away from my ex-beloved would be quicker to forget her. Lucas sincerely sympathized with Andrew because he, more than anyone else, had first-hand experience of what it means to betray loved ones. When I get back from the Army, I'm going to New York. Andrew once told me his plans. I have an uncle who lives there. He promised to help me get a job. I want to get hooked and stay there forever. Can I come with you? Lucas asked. I don't want to go back. Why? Why? I'll be haunted by memories every step of the way. And I'm afraid that if I run into Willie, I'm not going to be able to stand it and beat him so badly that he won't be left alive. And then there'd be trouble. His stepfather would make sure I didn't get away with it. I'll only make it worse for myself. That's why I want to go away, just like you, so I don't have to rub salt in the wound. I want to try to start a new life. 2 years in the Army flew by, and Lucas and his comrade left to conquer New York. Uncle Andrew never kept his promise, and for a while the friends had to make a living from odd jobs until they joined a construction crew. One day they were building a guest house for a rich man. He often had some shaved-headed dubious characters visit him in tinted jeeps, and one day one of those gangsters didn't start his car. They spent an hour trying to fix the car, but nothing worked. Can I look at it? Andrew suddenly volunteered. Go ahead. Reluctantly threw him the owner of the jeep. In 10 minutes, the car was on the move. What are you, a car mechanic or something? He asked. No, just an amateur, Andrew smiled back. The shaved-headed man looked him over from head to toe. Do you know how to handle a gun? He asked. I know how to use a regular gun. They taught us that in the Army, Andrew answered. Why do you ask? I want to offer a job, he replied. Now you need a couple of bodyguards for a respectable man. The pay is in bucks. Would you like to come? I'll go. The young man immediately responded without even specifying the amount. Can I go with a friend of mine? He's a tough guy too. We served together, so Lucas and Andrew began to guard the tight purse and body of one banker. It was a dangerous job since almost every day there was a bloody showdown between the gangs. But the mortal risks were generously paid. Soon Lucas rented a nice apartment and moved his mother there. Have you heard anything about Sophie? I've never heard from Sophie, he asked her once. They say she got married and went abroad, Alice said. Is that so? Well, I hope she's happy, Lucas replied. He tried not to think about everything that had happened before. Lucas wanted to put it all in past and not stir up the past. But that didn't mean he forgot Sophie. That was impossible. How could he ever forget the memory of his first love? He just forever hid his tender feeling in the most secret corner of his soul. 2 years later, Andrew suggested that Lucas open his own security bureau. You and I have had enough of slaving for your uncle, he said. It's about time we started our own business. Lucas supported his comrade's idea. However, the friends' plans were interrupted by a tragic event. A month later, Andrew was shot dead. It happened at the elevators when he was going down together with Lucas and the banker to the car waiting for them at the entrance. When Andrew saw a man with a gun, he did not have time to draw his weapon and did the only thing that was possible in such a situation. He covered his guarded face. Lucas reacted to the situation and shot the hitman at point blank range. Thus, the banker was saved, but Andrew was killed on the spot before the emergency services arrived. Lucas needed only a split second to prevent the irreparable. Andrew was given a proper send-off. The banker did not skimp on the funeral of the man who had saved his life. Expensive coffin, luxurious wreaths. I will put him the best monument, the banker assured the unsuccessful relatives of the deceased. There was a petite brunette among those present. She stood apart from the others, wiping away her tears with a handkerchief under her dark glasses. Lucas looked at her and wondered who she was. He had known all the many girlfriends of the deceased comrade, but this was the first time he had seen this girl. I would certainly remember her. Maybe she was the unfaithful Nicole, Andrew's ex-fiancée, he surmised. When Andrew's coffin was placed in the ground and all the appropriate rituals were observed, the funeral procession moved toward the exits of the cemetery. Lucas seized a moment, approached the stranger, and struck up a conversation with her. Did you know Andrew? He asked. Yeah, and I can't believe he's gone. So young. Lucas noticed a tear running down the girl's cheek. It was clear from her demeanor that she was worried sick. My condolences, he said. Thank you, she nodded. And did you work together with Andrew? Yes. And the whole nightmare happened in front of my eyes. I still can't get over it. Andrew was dying in my arms. I'll never forget the last moments of his life. The look in his eyes, his last breath. I will never forgive myself for not preventing it. My name is Lucas. I'm a friend of Andrew's. What's your name? I'm Daniela, the girl answered. Lucas wondered to himself. He had never heard Andrew say anything about a girl with that name. I don't think you could have changed anything, Lucas, she continued. Andrew must have had that fate. You can't escape it, as you know. For some reason, I was always afraid for him. It was like an intuitive sense that he wouldn't live long, that one day I'd lose him forever. And you must be related to him, he suggested. No, she answered. I'm nobody to him. Just a neighbor. We lived in the apartments next door to each other. He was 3 years older than me. And you know how this often happens. A young schoolgirl falls in love with an older boy. I was 13 at the time and he was 16. And of course he didn't notice me. He had fiancée, Nicole. And I secretly sighed and cried into my pillow at night, dreaming that one day he'd realize that I was better than the other one. And then we'd finally be together, fantasizing about our future together, composing, dreaming. Funny, isn't it? I don't think so, said Lucas. You can't make fun of sincere feelings, can you? And now I remember it all, and I'm ashamed of myself. How naive and stupid I was. I used to sneak in my mother's makeup and put on makeup to look older. I hoped he would notice me, but Lucas wouldn't even look in my direction, and he treated me like a little kid. I wish he'd never known how I felt. I never told him about them. I just wrote my declarations of love on the wall of his house. The concierge scolded me and erased them. But I insisted on writing the cherished words. Andrew, I love you, over and over again. It's so romantic. I'm even a little jealous of Andrew. Personally, I've never had such a beautiful admirer, said Lucas. You know, when Nicole got married, I was glad, she continued. I thought it was my chance, that Andrew was finally free, that I could win him over. But it wasn't to be. Who knew Andrew couldn't think of anything better to do than to go into the army? You should have seen how much I missed him. Then, 2 years in my youth is such a long time. My parents knew how I felt. They saw my sadness and told me to forget my neighbor. But is it so easy to just fall out of love at will? After all, love is a tricky thing. It comes and asks no one. It doesn't need anyone's permission. Lucas nodded silently. He knew better than anyone what she was talking about. And I even wrote Andrew a letter once. But he didn't answer me, she admitted. I'm sure there's a reason for that. It probably just got lost, Lucas hastened to assure her. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't, she shrugged. It doesn't really matter now. I knew from Andrew's parents that he lived in Moscow. I graduated from college this year and decided to continue studying. As you have probably already guessed, I wanted to be close to the object of my love. I hoped that he would pay attention to me and see what I have become and finally appreciate. But all my plans were ruined when his parents told me the terrible news. I'm really sorry about what happened. You must be in a lot of pain right now, Lucas suggested. Losing a loved one is an irreplaceable loss. I've had to bury loved ones before. You know, I felt a kind of emptiness in my soul. All the dreams that I cherished for so many years suddenly shattered into 1,000 pieces. I was living with thoughts of him, building castles in the air. I do not know how to be now when he is gone. It's like everything has lost its meaning, the girl admitted. You are still very young. I'm sure everything will be all right in your life, Lucas said. He really liked this girl. Sincere and simple. She was not afraid to be funny. She told him about her feelings and experiences. He felt a kindred spirit in her. After all, they had something in common, namely their first love, which alas never became happy. They had also lost someone close to them, Andrew, and they both needed support more than ever. After the funeral, Lucas and Danielle continued to communicate. As they got to know each other better, they felt a mutual sympathy for each other. Lucas was attracted to this girl. For a whole year he had been wooing Daniela. She mourned Andrew's death, but at some point she realized she had to move on, and that she was not his widow or even his fiancée. There's nothing wrong with opening your heart to a new feeling, this time mutual, Lucas urged Daniela. Finally, she reciprocated and moved out of the dormitory and into the apartment where he lived with his mother. After Andrew's death, the banker hired a partner for Lucas. The second bodyguard was John, a 45-year-old stocky man. At first, Lucas was even a little afraid of him. He looked too tough. But soon Lucas realized that appearances were deceptive and that John was actually a sincere man with a lot of life experience. Most of all, Lucas liked to listen to his stories about his service in the hot spots of the world where John had fought. Many times he was on the verge of death and looked into the eyes of death. One day, Lucas and his partner were sitting in the lobby of the office complex, waiting for the banker. They were on the lookout for each man and looked at him with suspicion. After all, under the guise of an ordinary man, there could be an assassin. You know, I almost became a killer myself once, John suddenly confessed. Tell me it's interesting, Lucas asked him. When I came back from the army, I was out of a job. And then a businessman came to me with a request to eliminate a competitor. He wanted to open a private security company in a small town, but some guy that was already doing it in full force. Didn't want to turn him down for good. So he decided to take him out the hard way. Even though I needed the money, I refused to kill him. It's one thing to kill your enemies in the war, and quite another to kill a man who never did you any harm. He had a wife and a son, the same age as mine. I just realized I couldn't do it. But as far as I know, the businessman eliminated the competitor anyway. Some of the medics helped him with that. Either they gave the man an injection or made him take a drug. Eventually they found the poor guy in the pond, and no sign of him. It's clean as a whistle. Lucas couldn't get a word out of his mouth. He felt as if he couldn't even breathe listening to John's story. It was as if he was paralyzed, a lump in his throat. Could it be that John was talking about my father now, I thought to myself? Maybe it's just a similar story. But are there such coincidences? What was his name? He barely managed to squeeze out. Who? The man. I don't remember, John answered. And the businessman, his partner clarified. Leo. But I don't remember the last name. It was Johnson or Jones, John tried to remember. How about Johnston? Lucas asked, feeling his jaw set. That's right, Johnston. How did you know that? John wondered. Lucas said nothing back to his partner. He felt a wave of savage hatred and anger rising from somewhere deep within him. He wanted nothing more than to avenge his father, who had been killed for nothing, his mother, who had lost her husband, and himself. He had felt too much grief from that family, and now he couldn't wait to get even with them. Kill the bastards. Lucas was spinning in his head. Like a typhoon, he flew into the apartment and started packing his bag. Where do you think you're going? Daniela wondered. I have to go on a business trip, Lucas lied to her. It's a pity, answered the girl. And Alice and I are making a holiday dinner, pork chops and more. And what are you going to celebrate? The guy asked, not taking his eyes off his work. A new addition to the family, Daniela hinted. Lucas stared at the girl in utter bewilderment. What do you mean by that? He asked. What a girl I have. You're going to be a daddy, Danielle said. I suspected a few weeks ago that I was pregnant. But I didn't want to tell you beforehand. I went to the Women's Health Center today, and the doctor confirmed it. It's 8 weeks, so we're going to have a baby by October. No way. That's the best news I've ever heard, Lucas rejoiced. He didn't end up going anywhere. It wasn't that Lucas had changed his mind about revenge. More than anything, he wanted to wipe his father's killer off the face of the earth. But thinking about the fate of his unborn child was far more important to him. I can't help my father anymore. He has been in the grave for a long time, and I need to think about the living. There was a hookah parlor. Lucas stopped and looked sadly at the school kids who were crowding around the gate. The boys took out a pack of cigarettes and lit up, looking around cautiously. Smoking again, you rascals? Well, I'll give you a hard time. I'm going to tell my parents. There was a loud woman screaming. A fat woman in a tight suit was running toward the boys, who scurried away at the sight of her. Lucas smiled involuntarily as he watched this scene. He remembered himself years ago, full of hope. It seemed as if he had been like them a long time ago. No, in general, Lucas did not grumble against his fate. He had nothing to complain about. He had his own business, a house, and a nice family, but somehow it still made his chest ache. The warm memories of his mother, of his childhood, and also of his living father and Sophie were all over him. Tears involuntarily welled up in the man's eyes. Nostalgia, he thought to himself. I must be getting old. Lucas, is that you? Suddenly the same woman's voice called out to him from the schoolyard. Lucas raised his eyebrows in surprise and stared at the full woman who was waving at him. You didn't recognize me, did you? She asked in a hurtful tone. Lucas looked closely at the woman and gasped. Could it be Clark, his former classmate, he thought. It can't be. It wasn't easy to recognize the head girl from 20 years ago in this performer. Amy, are you? He exclaimed and rushed toward her. They hugged each other. Well, for some people, Amy, and for others, I'm Mrs. Clark, she smiled, fixing her hair. Do you work at our school now? How do you live? Are you married? Lucas asked her a lot of questions. I live cheerfully, I don't get bored, she answered. Married 3 children of my own, and another 150 kids at school. And you worry about each of them as if they were your own. What else could it be? I'm the principal. What about you? I haven't seen you for ages. I heard you're doing well. In Moscow. Oh, come on, Amy. I'm doing fine, too. I have a lovely wife, 2 children. So everything is all right, he answered. What brings you to our part of the world, she asked. I came to sell my apartment. We don't need it. My mother lives with us after all. We have to visit my father's grave, Lucas said. He really wanted to know about Sophie, so he couldn't help himself. Well, do you know anything about our people? He began floridly. Who got settled? Who became what? You're wondering about Sophie, aren't you? Amy squinted slyly as she looked at her former classmate. And her, too, Lucas said. Sophie's gone to Las Vegas. She married some old man. I understand he had a casino or a hotel, but I don't know for sure. 6 months later, Sophie was widowed. It was kind of a messy story. I think she was even suspected of helping her husband go to his grave. The old man's children even sued the widow, but nothing could be proved. Then Sophie married someone else, a young guy, but not local, but an immigrant, and he turned out to be a swindler. He squandered all her inheritance from her first husband, so Sophie was left with nothing. But she never went back. Are her parents gone too? Lucas asked. No, you tell me too. Old people still live here. Well, living is an overstatement. More like surviving. Sophie's mother fell ill 3 years ago after a stroke, and her father has been taking care of her all this time, even though he's a diabetic on insulin. They spend a lot of money on medicine. They can barely make ends meet. And Sophie, as far as I know, does not help them financially or physically. She's never once shown up to visit her parents. I may be rude, but I think Sophie is an ungrateful pig. Lucas was uncomfortable hearing all this about his first love. So how's Willie doing? Is his stepfather still running the place? He hastened to change the subject. You mean Louis Johnston, don't you? Well, he's been dead a long time, Amy answered. Haven't you heard? It was in the papers. No, I didn't know, Lucas answered. Who killed him? I don't know who. You know who to ask. I'm a school principal, not a detective. There must have been a fight with someone, something they didn't agree on. Or maybe he got in someone's way and they decided to take him out. There were rumors around town that he had dirt on the governor. So on the eve of the election, they put an explosive in stepfather Willie's car. It went off so loud you could hear it on the other side of town. The driver died instantly, but Johnston somehow managed to get out of the burning car, covered in flames. He lived for a few minutes, screaming in pain. What a horror! Death to the dog. Good riddance to him, Lucas wanted to say, and could barely keep from doing so. And Willie must have inherited his stepfather's whole business. He asked. At first, yes. But it didn't last long at all. The thing is that he was diagnosed with cancer. He's undergoing treatment. He even flew to foreign medical centers, and he seemed to be in remission, but soon the disease returned. My wife left me as soon as she found out that he was doomed. She was young. She was a fashion model. Apparently, when she realized what was coming, she took off because she had to take care of Willie, and she didn't sign up for that. Didn't want to be a nurse to a dying spouse. Besides, there was nothing left of the business. All the money for treatment had gone, so she packed her bags and ran away. Is Willie dead too? No, I'm still alive. But for how long? Amy remarked sadly. He's in the city hospice now. His mother took care of him. I think she was the reason he lasted so long. But she's an old woman herself. Her strength, as you understand, is no longer the same. You have to give him injections and take care of him. I think he would be better off in a hospice. Soon Amy said goodbye to Lucas and hurried back to school, to her duties. He was left alone with his own troubled thoughts. So his mother was right, he thought. Life itself had put everything in its place and punished the guilty without his interference. His feet carried Lucas to the hospice. He wanted to meet the dying Willie. Why? He himself didn't know what he expected from this meeting. Maybe he just wanted to look into his former friend's eyes one last time. Half an hour later, Lucas was at the door of the hospice. He was lucky because it was visiting hours. A staff member showed him to Willie. Oleg was horrified to see a former classmate. In this skinny skeleton, covered with white skin, it was impossible to recognize the handsome man he used to be. His eyes were closed. He seemed to be asleep, with his head tilted to the side. "Hello," Lucas said as he approached Willie. The haggard man opened his eyes and looked intently at his former friend. He recognized him and slowly held out his trembling, bony hand. Lucas was aware of the enormous effort Willie had gone through in making this move. Nevertheless, he did not shake his outstretched hand. "Are you angry?" Willie asked in a husky, low voice. "Did you think I was going to bow down on your knees after all that?" Lucas asked. "Don't be angry. Sophie rejected me anyway. She didn't want me, and she didn't want you. She wanted more money. But what does it matter now? I don't care anymore, because it won't be long now. You know I'm dying," said Willie in the prime of my life. "That's the fate of a fiend." Former friend looked at Lucas with inflamed eyes. Willie's parched, cracked lips trembled visibly. "You probably want me to feel sorry for you, don't you?" Lucas exclaimed angrily. "You made my life miserable. I trusted you, and you were a real jerk. Instead of making excuses on your deathbed, you tell me what a shameful thing that is. You were selfish, and you're still selfish." Lucas spat in his direction and walked away. He was very angry with himself and regretted coming here. The next day, Lucas learned from Amy that Willie had passed away the previous night. The sale went smoothly, and Lucas could go back to his family. Before he left for the train station, he decided to walk down the street that was dear to his heart one last time, to say goodbye to the old oak tree that he had climbed up to the top as a boy, to the yard, to the city park. And he also looked into the cemetery, laid flowers, and headed for the exit. At the gate, he saw Lilith. She had grown old over the years and looked as if she had melted away, but he immediately recognized her. The old woman was holding flowers in her hands. She had probably come to visit her family, he guessed. The woman passed Lucas without raising her head. She was now unrecognizable as the old fashionista. She had not been an easy woman to look at in recent years. The years had passed, and the brooch of a small bird pinned to her faded blouse was the only sign of her former opulence.